I'm Chad Grevalese with Aerolite TV and your host of the show, Connect Up. If you're looking to gain traction in your career or business, you're at the right place because here we talk about connection. You need to know how to connect with the right people in the right way so you can build valuable relationships that lead you to career success. We have conversations about how to find your voice in your career. I interview communication experts, time and focus masters, and everyday people who have stories to tell of challenges overcome, goals achieved, and how their inner and outer communication and ultimately their relationships accelerated their progress and elevated their journey. Success in life is just a collection of the right conversations with yourself and others. Connect up to a better version of yourself. Connect up to your goals and a brighter future. Disconnect from the things that are holding you back and connect your way to where you want to be. Welcome back to the show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you can never miss an episode. And go to YouTube, Aerolite TV, and subscribe to that channel there because you won't just get the weekly show each week. You will also receive other videos that I share every week on how to communicate better and how to connect with people and how to grow your career in the way that you want to and take control of your life. So I'm really excited about today's interview with Bob Paff. He's a communication expert and he's going to share with us some really effective tips on communicating to win, but without there being any losers. And that's also the title of his new book, so be sure to check that out. Bob is a sought-after speaker, best-selling author, and radio show host, and he's been featured on multiple major media, including CBS, Fox, and NPT's Money in Business. He's also done some acting, voiceover work, and modeling, so as you can imagine, he knows how to communicate. And he's a master connector, and absolutely he has lots of experience on connecting his way up to career success and valuable relationships, and connect his way up out of problems that he's experienced in his own life. And he is refreshing to talk with because he'll talk about anything, because he understands the importance of communicating and not hiding our problems, not being ashamed of them either, and just discussing the hard things that usually people avoid talking about. So we're going to get more into that later in today's episode. We're also going to discuss some common interferences that get in the way of our ability to connect with people and how to overcome our fears. He shares the importance of connecting and talking with ourselves first and foremost, and how relevant that is in the results in our life. Connecting with others starts with how you connect with yourself. You're also going to learn how to clarify and verify with people what you just heard them say, so that people know you're really listening, because sometimes we are afraid to ask for clarification because then we think we're dumb. But if you don't ask for clarification, then you're gonna perform tasks wrong. It's gonna interfere with the relationship, and we're gonna get into that later in today's episode. By the end of today's conversation, your ability to communicate will jump up a level. So get ready to take notes and join me in welcoming to the show Bob Paff.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. You are a communication expert, and on this show, we talk about how to connect our way up to our career goals and up to better relationships and up to more happiness. And it's all about human connection here. And I wanted to ask you, what's a little bit about your story and what key aspects of it brought you to where you are today in your career and your current passions?
Well, and thank you for touching on the word connect. It's one of my favorite words. And as a business guy, as a sales, marketing, business guy, as an entrepreneur, I don't like the word networking. I prefer connecting. I think we're all connected through something. And so it's one of my favorite words. And I look at myself as a connector. To your point about the story and what brought me here is really, and I tell people the book is a transparent look at my life, Chad. And so when I was on the Steve Harvey show a number of years ago, he asked me what were the three most important things in my life. And I said my family, my faith, and my failures. And of course, what did he focus in on? What did he zoom in on? The failures, right? Tell me about the failures. So the book, I don't want to say the book is a compilation of a failure, but the story really emanates from my failures. So that's really the genesis of the whole thing.
Yeah, that's really important because sometimes we see our failures in a negative light, but it seems like that you see your failures as a positive thing. You're able to kind of reframe it for good.
Yes, and it's not easy. Let's talk to people. Let's be realistic here. This stuff is hard and it hurts. And would I wish it on anybody, or would I want to go through it again? The answer is absolutely not. But when we're there, Chad, we need to really immerse ourselves. I like to say we need to do the deep dive. We're here, as Abraham Lincoln said, and I think there's a quote behind me on the shelf. I don't know if you can see that, but Lincoln said, "Whatever you are, be a good one." And so if you're immersed in that failure, if you find yourself in a particular spot in your life, and I like to think we are where we're supposed to be, I think the obligation and the challenge is to make the most of that experience. And that's what I try to do. And that's what I try to do here. And I've tried to sort of pave a road for people to gain that clarity, for lack of a better expression, through my story, through my message.
I like that word clarity. Getting clarity is something we all want, and we have to communicate with ourselves in various ways to gain that clarity. How do you communicate yourself through failure to gain clarity?
You are. This is perfect. What I tell people when I speak and I travel is the most important person we speak to, Chad, is ourselves. Right? It's that person you look at in the mirror every morning and every night, whether it's the brushing your teeth or whatever routines you go through. The most, and I can't emphasize it enough, the most important person we communicate with is ourselves. But we don't really do a very good job of that, do we? I mean, I don't think we do. I'm married and divorced twice. I have 6 children. The most important person I communicate with myself. I need to gain that clarity, Chad. What does it look like? What do I want? What have I done? What have I learned? What have I gained? Where am I going? So it's a barrage of all these questions that we have to ask ourselves. And again, I'm going to go back to it. The Chinese proverb, there's great opportunity in pain. This stuff hurts. It really hurts. But we got to keep going. Franklin said, I'm a man of, these quotes. If you, what is it? If you're going through hell, keep going, because who wants to stop and get stuck there? And that's really what this is about. It's a journey.
In that journey, how has your relationships influenced your success and progress so far?
Well, first and foremost, the story, I want to say faith-based. A lot of people use that word. I like to tell myself or others, I'm a practicing Catholic, practicing to get it right, to get it better, I guess. But my faith really has gotten me through the deepest and the darkest times. And why? Because sometimes we find ourselves alone with ourselves, our thoughts, and I believe we have to have something to attach to and look around us. People get involved with addictions, don't they? So whether it's drugs or alcohol or other things, we need something, Chad. There are a lot of people out there. The biggest battle that folks face as they get older, and we could do a show on this alone, is loneliness. And so we do spend a lot of time alone. Folks move on, people come in and out of our lives, and so we need to be anchored in something. And so for me, while it's been a struggle and the faith has been challenged, and I like to say bent but never broken, it's really been my faith that's gotten me through the dark times, let's call them. And I'm always examining, I'm always reading. There's typically a stack of books anywhere in my house that once I'm inspired to, grab this one night, people think I'm crazy. Like, how do you read a chapter from this book and then go to another one? Well, I guess it's just the way my mind works and it spins.
That's really powerful. You mentioned something that got me thinking. You're talking about how, there's times where we are alone, and especially if we were just hurt or we just had to make a shift in our life and disconnect. Is it okay to have times in our life when we just have to disconnect and heal? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, the quiet times can be some of the most difficult times. You probably would classify me as an extreme extrovert. And so I love people. I love being around people. I love the energy that emanates from people. I'm intuitive. And so, I need that. But probably some of my, I'm not going to say all of my, some of my best growth and moments have been from those periods of, let's call it isolation, or periods of quiet, periods of being alone. Because, Chad, when we're put there for a reason. As I just said, we are where we're supposed to be. And let me clarify that. Where we are where we're supposed to be doesn't mean that we're where we want to be or where we think we should be. It's where we are. And we need to embrace that and think about, why am I here? What happened to put me here? How do I get myself out of here? You see, those where all those lessons are. And again, this is really difficult, challenging stuff. You need to find the resources. Again, I'm a sociable guy. I've got my kids every other week, and when they're not here, I'm like, I'm out of that dad mode. So what do? I could sit in front of the television, which I don't do, and eat a TV dinner, which I don't do, or I could go out and congregate with other people. And that's what I choose to do. So that's one of those arrows in the quiver that you need to find out as an individual, what works for you? What do I need to do?
It sounds like having an interview with yourself is a really important thing. You've touched on it a couple of times, how when we disconnect, or when we're where we're supposed to be, but we're not where we want to be, we have to have that little interview with ourselves where we're asking ourselves those questions of, how do I get myself out of here? What lesson do I need to learn? And a lot of us avoid those questions, so we keep repeating the same problems over and over again.
Great point. What you just defined was insanity, right? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I tell you, one of the reasons I think we fall into those traps is we don't like where we are. And so what do? We go back to the familiar, but the familiar may not be where we belong. That's what makes us stuck in a certain place, Chad. These things, not only are they so challenging, I think most people really, sadly, aren't able to make that leap and to cross over that bridge, because it's the devil you know for the devil you don't. Let me focus in on marriage and relationships for a second and use my own as an example. And I talk about this a lot. The divorce rate in this country is 50% for first marriages. It goes to 65% for second marriages, and it goes to 73% for thirds. So we seem to be getting it, we continue to get it wrong. And so we don't seem to learn from that. And so I've been single now for 8 going on 9 years. And one of the reasons that I've been single so long is I needed to figure out, okay, what did I learn from those 2 failed experiences? Why am I here? All right. Not a good place for me to be, but why am I here? What am I supposed to do with this? How do I prevent myself from making that mistake again? Whatever the mistake is, Chad, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's a business venture, whatever it is, you have to immerse yourself and do that work to figure out, what do I do going forward?
Definitely. As we're on the subject of talking about some failures and problems, I've heard you talk before about how as human beings, we're not in the habit of talking about our problems directly and our issues, and we tend to shove it down until it gets worse and worse. Why do we do that? Why do we hide that? And what's one thing we can do to kind of overcome that and actually talk about the important things?
Well, it's great having this conversation with you, because looking at you, you're probably a generation or two below. I'm 58, and so I think one of these things, sadly, is gender related. I think men are not encouraged. Maybe we would say not given permission to emote, to not feel things, to not express things, right? And there are a lot of double standards in the world that. And I really dislike the generalities. All men are this, all women are that. And so I think as a culture, we need to be more open and more receptive. I don't look at things as gender specific. Like, I don't think it's a woman's job to cook and a man's job to take out the trash. So I think until we get rid of those generalities and we're able to open up and effectively communicate. Now, there's a way to do it. And typically we don't do it right. We blame people, Chad. We blame people for things. We hold others accountable for our success, for our happiness, for figuring us out, for reading our minds, for all of these things. Man, I'm telling you, the best relationship you need to have and you need to cultivate is with yourself. And we are really bad at doing that. We're really, really bad, myself included. But so you called me a communication expert. I think I'm probably better than the average bear, but I work on this every day, Chad, to get better. I make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes until I leave this earth, as will you. It's owning those mistakes and say, my kids and I'll be having a conversation, and maybe I'll say something that really was spur of the moment. I'll go back to them a day later and say, I'm sorry for that. I was thinking this, or I was thinking that. We don't do that kind of stuff enough, Chad. I look for ways to say, please, thank you, and I'm sorry. We don't do that enough.
Definitely. That's what makes you an expert, is not that you are perfect at communication, but that you are working on it every single day and you're aware of it, because that's the biggest thing, is that most of us are not working on our communication. We don't think we need to. We're just kind of living day to day, communicating in our own habits, but you're continually trying to figure out how you can better and better and better yourself, because there's an infinity levels to communication. We'll never get to the top level.
Thank you for that. Thank you for pointing that out, because you're right. It's not that it's not the perfection. It's the perseverance, and it's the strive for the excellence, right? I mean, that bar is always raised. So, I'm learning new things on a continual basis. Some of this pain and the reading that I've done, I'm telling you now, I'm a better person this year than I was last year. Ask yourself, Chad, am I getting closer to what I want out of this life? Am I getting what I want out of this personal and professional relationship? It's that self-examination, Chad, that we've got to do on a constant basis.
Absolutely. You mentioned something about how we need to, am I better today than I was a year ago? You're comparing yourself to yourself,
Yes.
and that's a good type of comparison. One type of comparison that's not good is when we compare ourselves to other people, and I know that kind of comparison, it interferes with our ability to form good relationships with people. So do you want to comment on that? And what are some other things that interfere with our ability to communicate with people?
Oh, yeah, we do, right? And one of the things that I tell people, and I do it, I'm guilty of these things. There's always going to be somebody who's more attractive, taller, thinner, richer, this or thater. And so if we spend our lives expecting to ever get on top of that heap, it's not going to happen, and you're going to have a miserable life. And so I think we need to say, are those things, we have to assess the importance of things. I tell my kids all the time, think about how things, ready for this, make you feel. How do they make you feel? And so if you aspire to the fancy car, the big house, or the whatever it is, why? Ask yourself why. And how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel, having that or wanting that? And how does it make you feel because you don't have that? Or you experience a sense of deprivation? Like, what is it? Why are we always comparing ourselves? And I love that point that you made. We need to compare ourselves to ourselves, not to the Joneses and the Smiths and the next door neighbors and the guy that has this and the guy that has that. Richness and success and happiness come in many forms. I just did a local talk show, and we talked about being happy. There's this whole discipline now and books about being happy. And so what truly makes you happy? What do you want? And sometimes, Chad, I think those things involve severing relationships, severing, jobs, or maybe where you live is not the right place. These are really, really hard things for people to do because we're creatures of habit.
That's important to understand, that there are times where we have to sever certain relationships, that we have to know when to disconnect that if it's toxic or it's just not working out, and that's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed about having to get rid of certain relationships. I'm glad you mentioned that. And there are lots of things that interfere with our ability to communicate with people, and I'm sure in your experience you've discovered a few things that interfere with our ability to connect with people. I know in your book you mentioned fear and how that can interfere. Tell us a little bit about how fear can, and what types of fears can interfere with our ability to connect with people.
Well, here's a great story about fear, and it's actually on page 3 of my book. I had this whole fear diagram. Fear really paralyzes us, and the basic fears are failure, embarrassment, rejection, and confrontation. Failure, embarrassment, rejection, and confrontation. And then they lead to other things. Confrontation leads to despair. Rejection leads to isolation. Failure leads to immobilization. I failed, I can't do that, I can't pick up and go on. Embarrassment leads to anger. And so I think, let's go back again to how do things make us feel? And fear is a feeling, right? Like, why am I feeling this way? What am I afraid of? Why can't I say to that person? And here's the challenge though, Chad. Let's talk about confrontation for a second. Let's focus in on that one. You and let's put it in a professional context. You and your boss, your supervisor, whatever, see things differently, okay? You're not in agreement. It's creating angst for you. How do I confront? And I know confront, we think about it in a negative term, don't we? How do I confront? How do I attack, that situation? What do I need to do? And I tell people all the time, have a conversation with yourself. So what I say to you, Chad, is, we talked about this and you're expecting this out of me and this is how I'm feeling. Okay. But what we do is we say, you told me to do this, or you don't do that for me, or this isn't right, or whatever. And then what happens when we do that? What do people become? Defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the communication and the conversation, what happens to that? It shuts down. And that's when you get into all the stonewalling and the ghosting and the disappearing and all the other things we do. And why do they do that? Because they don't have the tools to have that communication. So fear's a bad one. I mean, like I said, Gandhi said it. It's all about the fears in our lives. Think about children when they start out. Do they have many fears? No. This is learned behavior. It's a learned pattern. The older we get, the more mistakes we make, the more failure we have. Little by little, Chad, these things chip away at our self-esteem. They chip away at our ego. They chip away at our confidence. And they chip away at our ability to communicate with ourselves, most importantly.
Absolutely. I like how you connected those different fears, that certain fears like embarrassment leads to anger, and how these fears lead to other fears, and there's a connection there, and that's really interesting.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you do to overcome your fears? Like, what helps you to face it or to get rid of it?
Yeah, well, and again, it goes back to working on getting better and better on a daily basis. I'm really much better now at certainly communicating with myself. Bob, why do you feel this way? I walk around the house talking to myself, and I'm not afraid to tell you and embarrassed to admit that because, listen, if you're communicating with yourself, you shouldn't be embarrassed to talk to yourself because at the end of the day, all we have really is ourselves. I'm constantly doing the self-examination. I really am trying to stay on top of it, trying to be positive. Life's tough. Bad things are going to happen. Bad's an interesting word because I tell people, is anything truly bad if we learn and grow from it? When you think about that, it may really hurt and would we want to do it all over again? No. But was it really bad? What did we learn from it? What did we gain from it? And I do believe, and you've heard this a million times, people come into our lives for a reason, a season, a purpose, or whatever. Not everybody here, Chad, is meant to stay. And not everybody will stay. But I suggest, and I would recommend to people, get what you can while it's in front of you. Get what you can while it's in front of you, while it's on your lap, while it's presented itself to you. It's right there in your face. That's one of the things I will tell you that I think I'm keenly aware of. So if somebody steps on an elevator that I've been wanting to meet for 6 months, you better believe I'm going to make that introduction. Where a lot of times folk will say, oh no, that's whoever. That's Michael Jordan. I can't talk to him. I've admired, oh my God, but who am I? You got to make that introduction. The introduction could be, hey, I might embarrass myself, but you're my hero. I mean, who can say no and walk away from that kind of stuff? So they're the things, having that conversation with yourself, get your elevator speeches down, get your phrases down. One of the things I like to focus on and talk about, Chad, is integrity, authenticity. Authenticity is beaten up and beaten around a lot. Everybody claims to have it, claims to strive for it. Just get real. Get real with yourself. Again, goes back to the communication with yourself. So it is a lifelong project and a challenge and a struggle for us to do this.
It absolutely is. And I like how you talked about that. There's nothing to be ashamed about talking to yourself. I was always the guy that, as I was processing something, I'd be mumbling to myself. And when I got married, my wife would comment, like, what are you saying? Are you talking to me? And I was like, no, I'm just trying to process through something. Yeah, but I was in a space where a lot of my self-talk was negative, and I didn't know how to control it and focus it. Now I'm working on trying to, use my voice to create my life. And it seems like you're somebody who's doing that. You're using your voice on a daily basis to create your life, whether it's with yourself or with other people. And you're not afraid to do that, to walk around your house and talk to yourself so that you can be clear. And I like how you mentioned with our perceptions that we can't control everything that happens in our life, but we can always control our experiences with it. And how you seem like that you're getting into the habit of talking yourself into switching your perception on something so that a bad thing isn't so bad, so that it ends up becoming good. And that's a really important lesson to.
Well, think about this. I tell people all the time, I said, I'm only responsible for what I say. I am not responsible for what you hear.
Mm.
because we process things through our own filter. And so, sadly in this world, we don't always see things as they are. We see them as we are. So we see them, Chad, based on our life experiences around whatever's going on, which can be absolutely totally different. Well, it is than everybody else's experience around that same thing. And so these are the things that we fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to other folks and not having that clarity. And I tell you, one of the most important things that I've learned is find the good people in your life. I think it's chapter 12 of my book is called, the whole chapter is based on who's on your team. Who's on your team? So spend a little bit of time. Maybe it's on a daily basis. Maybe these are one of those exercises you go through on a regular basis. Who's on your team? Who are your go-to people? Who's been there for you?
Absolutely. And I want to go back to when you mentioned how you can't control what others hear, but you can control what you say. Let's talk about listening for a little bit. How on the reverse end do you listen to others and try to listen as good as possible so that you can get the message that they're trying to send you?
Well, I think one of the best tools that I could give anybody, and I try with myself, is when someone says something to you, the listening skills, make sure that you have clarity. And so let me give you an example. You say something to me, and remember, we process things through our own filter. You say something to me that triggers something that happened when I was 18 years old. My first girlfriend broke up with me or something. You make a comment and it triggers that whole thing. So what I would do in a situation like that, if you're having a conversation, is to repeat it back, to play it back. Chad, is this what you meant? This is what I heard. Okay, two different things there, and you know that. What you hear and what a person meant could be the same, but they could be entirely different. The other thing that factors into those things is inflection, tone, energy. There are a lot of dynamics, Chad, that are going on around the conversation or around that physical interaction. So you've got to be quiet, and so listen to that, and then I would just process it back to people. Ultimately, and Dale Carnegie talks about this. The sweetest word in the English language is a person's name. People want to hear their name, and so they want that acknowledgement. And so I think that's one of the greatest gifts as human beings that we can give someone else is that acknowledgement, is that respect, is that courtesy, and listening is certainly one of those. Let's say we're having a conversation and you're on the listening side and I'm on the delivering side. What I could say to you, Chad, is, was I making myself clear? Now think about it this way. Here are two comments. Chad, was I making myself clear what I said? Or I can say to you, do you understand what I'm saying? Or were you listening to me? Here are the differences between those two. I'm accepting the responsibility on the first one. I'm saying, Chad, was I making myself clear? And then well, Bob, this is what I heard you say, or this is what I think you said, or this is how I processed what you said. Is that right? Am I right? Oh, no, I wasn't meaning that. I didn't mean to imply. I wasn't, so that's how it's really connecting, Chad. It's really listening. It's taking that time, but the onus is on you. Remember, we talked about communicating with yourself. Chad, you can say, hey, was I clear on that? Did that make sense to you? I was listening to it as I was saying it, and I thought, wow, that sounds pretty confusing. Did that make sense? And that's how that real dialogue and that connection happens.
That's really helpful, because I think I've noticed it that I used to have this problem a lot where somebody would say something, I didn't quite understand what they said, but I was too afraid to speak up and say, can you repeat that? And so coming back to the fear thing, I think one reason why a lot of times we don't ask for somebody to clarify is because we're afraid of that. But we're afraid of that. And I like how you're just owning it, like, hey. And so, but by you saying, was I making myself clear? What's great about doing that on the reverse end is that if the other person is too afraid to ask for clarification, you're helping them out by basically giving them permission to say, oh, yeah, actually, no, it wasn't too clear. Can you repeat it?
Well, particularly in a professional environment, think about it. You're called into your boss's office and your boss tells you they want you to do something. Man, the fear's really kicking in because you don't want to be that person that says, I'm not sure I understand you. Or so what happens in some cases, You walk away thinking you understand the message. You go on and you perform the task. You come back a week later and it's not at all what was expected. And so what you're better off doing is say, hey, I really want to be clear that I'm understanding. This is what I heard. You want me to boom, 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 and you need this by Thursday. Did I get that right? Because I really want to make sure I want to do it. I love the, please, thank you, and forgive me, but also practice self-deprecation. Practice self-deprecation. Don't be afraid to say, I really want to make sure I get this right. I want to do a good job for you. And this is what I'm thinking. Am I on track? Am I on target? Is this what you said? Is this what you want? When I'm hired to do, and I do lots of different things, I get hired to do voiceover work. I do some, you may have known if you looked at some of my stuff, I played a congressman in House of Cards. When I show up on that set, I'm there to do a job. And so I have to put my ego aside and say, was that what you wanted? Was that how you saw the role? Did it sound the way you wanted it to delivered? Because my ego has to go absolutely out the window. I know I'm bringing the skills and the talent. There's no question about that. But these are things, we all have this, well, you're not better than me, or you can't tell me what to do, and all that nonsense. You need to let that dribble just go away. Just absolutely let it go, Chad. And what it brings into your life is peace and clarity.
Yeah, definitely. We gotta ditch that ego, and we have to verify, we have to clarify, we have to verify again, and we have to keep doing that.
Absolutely. Ego really just, it just ruins a lot of things. It really, really does. And I found as I've gotten older, the more humble and the more self-deprecating you can be, the happier. And you just feel better about yourself. You really, and I tell people the simple things like smiling, good morning, complimenting somebody on, walking down the street who has a particularly nice outfit. We've become so sensitive these days, but to see someone and say, that color looks really great on you. Try that and watch the reaction. Not only do they respond to you positively, but I guarantee you will feel better as a result of making that gesture, which is instantaneous. This is not rocket science, but we can do the rocket science all day long. We go to school for rocket science. It's the basics we get wrong.
Yep. We all know we're supposed to compliment people, but none of us do it, and we're almost afraid to. Yeah, we're afraid to give those compliments.
We feel insecure. We feel like, why should I tell you that blue's a good color for you, Chad? Because what about me? What about the blue in me? What are you going to give me something back? Forget about it. Let it go. Give it away. I like to say, give your flowers to people while they're alive. Give the accolades to people while they're alive, instead of saying, Joe was such a great guy. I should have told him that when he was still here, and now he's dead. I'm being very blunt with you, but we don't do enough of that kind of stuff. And it really elevates our emotional status with people. It's great capital. It's great equity.
I wanted to kind of just back up a little bit to when you were talking about how when we go to our boss and we're afraid to ask for clarification on things. I think there's definitely a wrong way to do it, where you almost attack them by being like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that makes no sense. What's wrong with you? Whereas what you said, though, is the right way, where it's like, did I get that right? This is what I heard. Did I get that right? So there's a right way to ask for clarification and a wrong way.
Yes, absolutely. And what it does, too, it strengthens the relationship, because now that person feels like, oh, you're not afraid to come to me. You're not afraid to ask for that clarification. You're articulating, right? You want to do a good job. Only good can come from that. The other one, if you don't get it and you mess it up, and then let's say 2 days go by and you're doubting what you're doing, and then you go back and say, you know what? I've been working on this for 2 days, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I heard you. Well, we had that conversation. So it's really, Chad, I think that's a good listening tool that everybody should practice, whether you believe you have 100% clarity or not. What's wrong with confirmation? You just said it, the validation. I forget what the verification. What's wrong with verifying what we think we know, what we think we've heard? This is what, even if you're dead certain that's it, say, I think I got it. I think I got it, Chad. But can we talk about this a little bit more? Are you talking about A, B, C, D? Did I get that right? Do we need to drill down a little bit further? Because I want to make sure, because I really want to do a good job here. That's a great conversation with somebody.
That's really important. to double check, that don't just think, because sometimes we know we didn't get, but other times we think we got it and we still missed a piece. So that's important.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had too many experiences with employers before where I was too afraid to speak up and ask for clarification. I did something wrong and it totally interfered with the relationship. And I did that enough to finally learn my lesson that it's like, nope, from now on I'm just going to ask for clarification. Once I started doing it, they respected me more for it, and it really did up that relationship. Even though before I kept telling myself the story that it would actually interfere, that they would think I was too dumb. Why did I hire this kid? He doesn't know what he's. But
well, it's in the tone, it's in the words that you choose, it's in, let's go back to the self-deprecation where you say, hey, again, I think I understand you, but I really want to make sure that I got it right. This is what I heard. This is how I think I'm going to approach this. Is that right? Because then it's really, quite frankly, elevating. And I've been this CEO. I've built and run things and sat on boards and done that. If somebody comes to me and says, Bob, I want to make sure that I heard this right because I really want to do a good job, it's going to elevate their esteem in my eyes. So I'm going to know when I hand this project out that you're going to make sure. Now it sets the bar, and I'm all about you keep raising that bar. But in the future, maybe you then become that go-to person because they know that they're going to go to you, and there's going to be clarity there. You're not afraid to ask those questions. Am I doing this right? And so, and Chad, the more we do these things, the more comfortable we are doing these things, and the better we are at doing these things. Practice makes perfect. We don't practice communication like we practice other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you practice it like you're already in the game as you're practicing it.
That's right.
On a daily basis.
That's right. It's exactly right. Yep, it's so true.
So I want to, as we kind of close up, I want to first ask you about, because a conversation that I think would be interesting, and I heard that you have some involvement in suicide prevention and mental health and organizations like that. Yeah. Do you want to mention a little bit about what some of the reasons why there's things that we're uncomfortable talking about, and that's a communication issue? Can you relate that to some of your involvement in suicide being this thing that keeps increasing and keeps becoming a problem? And then after that, we'll kind of discuss your book more. And
sure, yeah, and thank you. The whole suicide prevention for me, I have 6 children, and this is. Mental health and challenges around that have affected our family on a very personal level. And so I've been looking for something to sort of lend my name and my face, and I like to refer to it as my thimbleful of celebrity to raise awareness. A lot of these things, they're not sexy to talk about. And so we don't. And unless it's really a disease, or unless it's something like cancer, and God forbid, I lost my brother and my mom to cancer, so I don't mean to minimize the importance of that, but when things are more psychologically related, right? And so we focus more on the neck down. So if it's something that people are dealing with, we don't want to talk about those things, and we're kind of in the closet, to use that term. So last year, for example, there were 18,000 murders in the country. There were 44,000 suicides. And so, and then, believe it or not, what happens is when celebrities like Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade commit suicide, actual percentage of suicide can go up. And it can go up because it's being glamorized, right? And so people are thinking, if they thought their last resort was suicide, my life really sucks compared to that, because these are people with money and access to, we would think, good mental health, wouldn't we? And addiction, whatever they're struggling with. So if they can't make it through, then I've really lost hope. So I support the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We've got an event coming up here in Baltimore on October the 9th to raise awareness. They're one of the sponsors of my radio show, and I'm like so thrilled that they're doing that, and we're partnering, and it's really a partnership. I want to get it into some schools. College kids, as you know, are under a lot of stress these days, and so I think I've seen the estimates that one in every 5 college students has considered suicide, and 1 in 5 might not sound like a big deal, but if that 1 in 5 is your son or your daughter, it's huge. And so we got to stop these things. It's growing, and it's becoming a bigger problem. So I'm very excited about doing the work, and it does come back to that communication. It does come back to, let's not be afraid to say I'm struggling with this, and where do I get help for this, and why am I feeling that way, and we need to bring that, again, out of the closet. We need to put a face on it.
Yeah, definitely. And as we work on ourselves and our ability to communicate with people,
Yeah.
we'll be able to build trust with those that are struggling easier, and they'll be more willing to open up to us. And so it's we need to own that it's our responsibility to become effective communicators so that other people that are struggling will feel comfortable opening up to us. And you're definitely in the forefront of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's tough, because people, we label people, don't we? Just like we generalize, we label people. And so if somebody comes forward, or they stigmatize forever because they've had struggles around these issues. And so for those people, they're like, no, I can't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go forward with that. I was just reading a great article on the level of, or the number of physicians who commit suicide. And the story was about this very, very prominent surgeon who committed suicide. And what he said was, or what the article said was, he took some time off of work. He wasn't sleeping. His psychiatrist retired. He got referred to somebody else who gave him, put him on 2 medications that really made it worse. He didn't want to go to his colleagues. Think about it. I mean, personally, you're like, well, I'm going to go to this surgeon, and he's battling depression and anxiety, and he's having suicidal tendencies. So there's the career aspect, right? And as far as that risk of people knowing that I'm struggling with these things, so what do? We remain silent. It's really, really a difficult situation, and I don't think it's going to get better until we're able to communicate effectively around it and find those tools. So I'd like to be involved in that. It's really very simple. So many people are doing great work, and I'm really at the lower end of that level, but I'm trying to help out as much as I can.
Well, I'm sure a great start to get involved in that and become better communicators is by reading your book. And so do you want to tell us a bit about your book, how we can connect with you, how we can get it, and about your show as well?
Well, thank you. I'm easy to connect with, as I think you know. I'm all over social media. LinkedIn is certainly a big platform for me. Folks are always amazed, Chad, I will tell you, when I respond to them directly, because a lot of people don't. I don't have social admin people. I have a team of great folks not even a team. I've cobbled together some folks maybe to help design a graphic or something, because technology is not my thing. But I am very much involved, and this book, by the way, Communicating to Win in Life, Love, and Business, is a story of my life. So it's a transparent look at my life. It's been referred to as the Bible of communication, which I love. And so it reads like a story. And so I put myself out there. There are no names in there other than the dedications, my 6 children. I talk about my church and my faith in there a little bit at the beginning and what that's meant to me. But folks can find me on bobpaff.com. They can Google me. They can find me on LinkedIn. We set up a fan page on Facebook for the Bob Paff Show. The show is great because people can call in from all over. There's an 800 number. You can download the app. The launch date is October the 5th. It's going to be every Friday night from 6 to 7 p.m. So I've got a great drive time hour. It's WCBM 680. You can go to the App Store, download the app, and you can call in from anywhere in the country and talk to me. It's talk radio, Chad. So I've done this before, but it was pre-book. So I think the message has grown. We're over 12,000 followers on LinkedIn and growing. And so it's getting out there. I really, 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 really want to reach more men. Women tend to really get the message and embrace it for probably multiple reasons. But I want, I want men to no longer be afraid to communicate. I jokingly say, and people have tossed it around as a title for another book that I'm working on, Real Men Wear Pink. It's okay to express your feelings. It's okay to express your pain. It's okay not to have all the answers, but we really are a village, and it's a community. And so we need to be comfortable reaching out to other people. And that's the goal. That's my goal, is to try to do that, to help everyone and that's where we're going off in another direction. And we can hopefully chat again. The show's we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to push the envelope. I'm going to get into politics. I'm going to get into religion. Look what's going on at the Catholic Church, and I'm Catholic. And I was molested by a priest. So I can relate to those stories. I want to talk about those things. We've got to talk about these things, Chad, because they don't go away.
Yeah, that's great.
We harbor them, don't we? So.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, that seems like it's going to be a great show, that it's just going to give people permission to talk about things that we have to talk about, so that we can address these problems, so that we can start communicating, because we're getting into a time where we've got to just get over these communication hesitancies that we have and start talking and listening and forming these relationships. And I really thank you for coming on our show and sharing such great wisdom with our audience on how to communicate and why it's so important. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great talking to you.